Hey, my beautiful bitches, it's me, Fiona St. James, and welcome to another episode of Fiona's Coffee Talks. And as always, I like to start off every day with a fresh, hot, black cup of coffee. Hold the cream! I'd love to. And of course, I think of my favorite quote of the century, which says, life is too important to be taken seriously. So lighten up, folks. So today's topic is, drumroll please, part 2 of my 8-part series, The Life of an Actor. But before I get to that, I just want to give a little side note here. So you guys know I'm taking care of my elderly folks. My father, unfortunately, ended up back in the hospital, but he's back out. Everything's going to be fine. But what I've realized is that I'm really good at taking care of them and taking care of people. And a lot of times lately, I find that I lose sight of taking care of myself. So moral of that story is do not deny your own mental health, because I have a good way of sort of doing that for other people, and then I neglect myself, and then I end up in a little bit of a funk at certain points. Good news is I'm self-aware enough to figure that out and catch myself before it gets to whatever. So any friends out there that I've spoken to, if I have snapped at you, I apologize, because my plate has been full and it's all a bit overwhelming, but that's no excuse. I will handle it a lot better moving forward. So, all right. Back to the topic at hand. So last week or 2 weeks ago, when I did part 1, I gave an overview of the beginnings of my life as an actor. So let's fast forward. This is part 2. The very first thing that I landed was about 30 years ago. I had a part in To Wong Foo, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar. But let me give you the history of that. B-Bang Kidron, who directed that, prior to that, did a documentary which was called Hookers, Hustlers, Pimps, and Their Johns. And as we all know, I've been in that world my entire life of, God, going on 38 years. So through a friend of mine, she had a friend who was part of B-Band's crew, and they happened to be in New York. And he asked her, "Oh, but we're doing this documentary. Do you know any hoes?" And she was like, "Yeah, my friend Fiona." So then I met B-Ban, and we got along well, and she wanted me in her documentary. And it was interesting because I had agreed to do it, but then at one point, because I was sort of stopping for the time being, I kind of thought I didn't want to do it, but she had said to me, "Well, remember, if you do this for me, then, I'm going to be filming Steven Spielberg's upcoming movie, To Wong Foo." It was a Universal Productions, and this was back in 93 that we shot this, so literally 30 years ago. So I agreed to it, and case in point, I went through the whole audition process. Kenny Ortega was the choreographer, uh, and I ended up getting the part. So moral of that story is turning tricks does have its privileges, but it was interesting how, because I did that, I have that aspect of my life. And also, I was doing drag. So even in those 15 minutes of that documentary, you see me, as myself, but then also getting ready and fully transformed myself. And they even came with me to a show that I did at Cafe Wawa, and they ended up filming that. So it was a really wonderful 15 minutes. And, I've always been an advocate when it comes to that part of my life of being open and honest about it, because I think that so many people go to the typical, the stereotype of, if you do that kind of work, then it's because you're messed up, or you come from a broken home, or you're stupid, or you're this, or you're that, which all of that exists, but there's so many different subcultures within that world. So for me, it's always important to let it be known that, no, you don't have to come from a broken home, or be, $5 crack whore. You could be a businessman about it and just enjoy sex and enjoy money and put it all together. So that's why any chance I get that I can speak that truth, I do that. So true to her word, I went through the whole audition process. I ended up getting the part. So I was one of the LA queens at the end of the movie, although we shot it in New York in Old Westbury. But it was quite wonderful because it was 30 years ago. So then the auditions happened here in New York. So anyone who was a New York drag queen at that point was in it. They were either in the New York scene at the beginning or the LA scene at the end. And the majority of us were not union members, but because we got we worked so much on it and made a lot of money, we ended up getting in the union. Now, the interesting part was New York Queens, they filmed for like a week. We filmed ours in like 2 days, and we were hired as featured dancers, but they ended up paying us as day players. And I think they did that because since the New York drag queens worked so much, they automatically were eligible to join the union because they got like 7 days of work as opposed to our 2 days. So rather than like saying, okay, well, as a feature dancer, you get a waiver, they're like day player, and that made me automatically eligible to join the union. So as a union member, I never knew that whole uh, process of like getting waivers and wanting to get into the union. I know so many people who have the two waivers and they're waiting for that third one. Was fortunate enough that I landed this part and I was automatically able to join. And the process of that particular part was incredible because we actually rehearsed for 4 weeks. So every week we were on payroll and we would get together with Kenny Ortega and we would rehearse everything, the actual number at the end. And then when we actually filmed, as I said, we filmed it in 2 days and it was long. They were long days. And I didn't know anything about like meal penalties or this or that. And because I knew that we were getting paid as dancers, I was expecting my check to be like this much. And we finished filming, and I remember the very next day I flew to Europe for a month. And then when I came back a month later, the check was in my mailbox. And even before I opened it, I like put it to the light and I was like, what? Like I saw that it was this astronomical amount, a lot more than what I thought it would be. And then I opened it up and saw, oh my God, they paid me as a day player. So I immediately called Screen Actors Guild, made my appointment, and I joined the union. And but it was like the most wonderful experience to like have that be my first time on set and have it be something like that where I wasn't just I was shouldn't say just, but I wasn't in the background. We were like in the forefront, and we each were even assigned our own like hair person and our own makeup person. So like the 2 days that we were on set, like 15-hour days, they would yell cut, and then our personal hair and makeup person would like zhuzh us up, which is kind of wonderful. And I still get residual checks from that particular gig. Of course, 30 years later, they're like granny's teeth, few and far apart, and they're tiny, but it's something. So every time I get that, it just reminds me that that was the first thing I did and the wonderful experience it was. So, knock on wood, I mean, I'm fortunate that the first thing I did was something like that, and it enabled me to dance, be in drag, and have this incredible experience. I remember even going to the premiere was at the Ziegfeld like a year later when it went out, and there was the after party and we all showed up and we were in drag and it was just incredible. So anywho, that was my introduction to Screen Actors Guild. And as I said, I'm fortunate that it was what it was. So anyway, viewers, tell me your first time. Hopefully it was as wonderful for you. And, maybe you did get that part right away and you didn't have to deal with, like, I want waivers to get into the union. Because if you could do it that way and just get right in and not deal with all of that other stuff, that's the way to go. So, all right, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. So in 2 weeks will be part 3 of 8, and then that will be the very next thing I did, which was the movie Stonewall. That's the story in itself, but this is this story. Let's not jump the gun. So don't forget, thumbs up, subscribe if you have not. Leave your comments. Let's get this dialogue going. And as always, I'm glad that you guys are here with me. Alrighty. Till the next time. Love you.